very good listener and speaker. The one thing we were discussing yesterday was the discipline. You see, I'm late, more 15 minutes late in the class. So this is a typical, may not be the South Asian, but Pakistani behavior, which is lacking us behind in the progress. So sorry for that, missing your 15 minutes. I want to be very frank that the Pakistani constitution is one of the worst constitution in South Asia. If you monitor the Pakistani newspaper, you will continuously reading the headlines about the issues with the minorities in Pakistan. We have the worst blasphemy law in Pakistan. Though the minorities are concerned with this law, but the most of the people who've been punished under this law were Muslims. We still have some gender-biased laws in Pakistan. We still have the certain laws which deprive the community with their political, certain religious and social laws. If you look at the human rights situation in Pakistan, it may not be satisfactory. Maybe in South Asia, some organization gave us some good ranks, but if you talk to a common Pakistani, whether he lives in a village, small town, or in a town, they are not satisfied with their basic fundamentals, human rights in Pakistan. But at the same time, we got the worst constitution in South Asia. But among Muslim countries, we got one of the finest constitution. The reason this constitution is somehow one of the criticism which we have in Pakistan, that it's more religious constitution which contains the definition of the Muslims. This is the only constitution in the world which contains the definition of a religious community. And this is, in a preamble, is called the Pakistan Islamic Republic of Pakistan. This is gave it a more religious identity. But at the same time, it ensures all basic fundamental human rights which were guaranteed under the UN Human Rights Charter. It may be considered as a dichotomy, but many Muslim countries conceive it as a model constitutions. We have been many times in different parts of the Muslim world, including the Malaysia, Indonesia, in Tunisia, in Morocco. And we try to convince them this is not a model constitution. You may learn from our experiences, our mistakes, our issues. But even then, they perceive this is the best religious constitution. It may be interesting for you to know that Al-Qaeda chief right now, the Ayman al-Zawahiri, he had reviewed the Pakistani constitutions, and he had come up with pretty sharp criticism on the Pakistani constitutions and declared it and tried to deconstruct class by class that why this constitution is not Islamic. And the state which pretend to be an Islamic country, the society which pretend to be a religious Muslim society, their social contract is not Islamic. And this document is available online. It was translated in our local languages, not only Urdu, but in Pashto language as well. You see, one side, the Muslim countries admire the constitutions. On the other side, the non-state actors, the terrorist organization, consider it's the main hurdle in their way. And they say this is the major document, the social contract, which is the major hinder in the way of the Islamic revolution, not only in Pakistan, but as well across the Muslim world. So the constitution is important, social contract is important. And why the one side the states admire and the non-state actors are critical towards the Pakistani constitutions? As I had mentioned, this is the blend of certain secular or what all human history has experienced so far, they had tried to accommodate. And if you talk to the legal community in Pakistan, they will say this is the Pakistani constitution is full of contradictions. One side it says that all citizens are equal. It contains a broader, comprehensive definitions of the citizenships, but at the same time it contains some clauses which bars on some religious freedoms. You say that all, without any gender bias, all citizens will be equal, but we have seen some very critical and sensitive laws about the gender discrimination in the country. One side it say that the treason, the sabotaging the constitutions is a treason. But at the same time, it not only the constitutionalism just tolerate the interventions, influences, which somehow make this social contract critical for in a political context. So this debate is still going on in Pakistan on constitution, on constitutionalism, that how we will implement or make it this social contract a more binding force within the community, between the society and the state, how we can make it a functional document to regulate the spaces which is encroached by the power, security, social elites in the country, and they are not ready to surrender. They are not ready to accept this social contract as the supreme document in the country. And we have a history of it. The constitutions which we are going to discuss here today is the 1973 constitution. And before that we had experienced the two more constitutions and one legal framework order. But we had started with the provisional arrangement just after the independence. Yesterday, I was trying to understand the perspective with the discussions on the Nepalese and the Indian constitutions was going on. So initially we also had the 1935 Indian Act, Government Indian Act, as a provisional arrangement to run the affairs of the state. But at the same time, the founder of Pakistan has established the Constituent Assembly, which had come up with late, with around, it took 8 years to come up with the first constitution of Pakistan. On 23rd March 1956. And there was a lot of debates at that time was going on by the religious actors. They were trying to make it Pakistani constitution the first Islamic constitution of the history. There was the power elites, there was a bureaucracy. They wanted to have the safeguard their interest. So this tussle was going on at that time between the religious leadership and the power elites in the country. And ultimately, the power elites won, and their interests were safeguarded in these constitutions, and the religious leaderships were satisfied while including the one clause in the constitution, in the preambles, that the sovereignty belongs to God, it belongs to Allah. And the executive will act on the behalf of this sovereign power. But before the full implementation or the comprehensive implementation, before it starts the implementation, it was being provoked, and the constitutions was abandoned by Pakistan's first military bureaucracy coup in 1958. And then there was chaos, the constitutional chaos in the country for more than 4 years. But 1956 constitutions, it may be interesting that these constitutions, it maintained the central powers of the government by ensuring that the president remains powerful. Our first 2 constitutions were the presidentials in their natures, where the president had the executive powers. And the issue which has resulted later, the breakup of Pakistan, was started from this constitution. And when the provinces were deprived for their basic provisions, the rights. When the elections were held, then these were the Pakistan's most controversial elections, which were not accepted by most parts of the country, neither by the East Pakistan at that time, nor by the Western Pakistan at that time. And then there was a lot of grievances that had emerged. In 1962 constitution, this was the General Ayub. He had come up with the 1962 constitutions, and he claimed this is, every time we claim this is the best constitutions. But the campaign which was designed and launched at that time and promoted the Pakistani constitution as the best constitutions, especially in the non-allied movement countries, was once in 60s. This was one of the selling point for Pakistan, or the component of the soft images of Pakistan in the world, that we had the best constitution, though the opinion by the ordinary Pakistani, the constitutional and legal political communities in Pakistan was quite different. And the major criticism on this 1962 constitution was the sole purpose of it to approve and legitimize the military government decisions. It abolished the office of the Prime Minister, given the sole executive authority to the President, who it mandated had to have held a rank higher than Lieutenant General. In the military, Field Marshal he was called, the General used Field Marshal. He re-elected 1965 and he had defeated, this is quite interesting election in the Pakistan history. And two aspects are quite interesting. That the electoral college was quite limited, which we called the basic democracies at a time. That first you will elect the local bodies, and the local bodies will elect your president. So this was quite interesting, and this was being criticized, being challenged. And the second, the Pakistan's founder sister, the Fatima Jinnah, was the contender in this election, and she was defeated in this election by the military ruler. And this is also important in the Pakistani political and the constitutional perspective. That when the first debate on the constitution was going on in 1948, 49, the 50s, the religious parties were the argument in the support of their argument was they were challenging the vision of the founder of Pakistan. That this state, that how Pakistan could be a democracy and Islamic state together. And all these religious actors at that time were supporting the founder's sister in these elections. And they had justified at that time that a Muslim woman can be a head of the state. Though there was the opinions, few parties, religious parties were supporting the female candidate, and this is some transitional arrangement. She will run the country for one term, and then we will have the suitable constitutional arrangement in the country, and then she will hand over the government to the male president or the male authorities. So this election, the second elections under this constitution proved triggered one of the political crisis in the country. And we know that this was quite a bitter time in the Pakistan history. And after the East Pakistan declared its independence in 1971, then we had another constitutions. And this constitution was important that after the break of the country, there was realization that the country was broken because of multiple reasons, but there was two major reasons: because of the military dictatorships, and the second and the most important was the constitutional failure, evolving the workable social contract among the different component federating unit of the Pakistan and different communities in the Pakistan. So this was the, yes please.
Could you please repeat the second one, the failure?
Failure was the constitutional failure. Constitutional failure, the social contract was a glue to unite the federating units of Pakistan. wasn't to remove the grievances or address the grievances of the Pakistani citizens or different units. So this was the one of the major reasons. They had the Pakistan's Constituent Assembly had in its background, and even if these issues were discussed so often in each and every debate in the parliament, outside the parliament, the history being documented, these were the two major concerns, and they try to make sure that this social contract should be a workable and should be a federal, where all provinces, federating units have the independence, the administrative, executive independence, and there should be some clauses, there should be some bars that the military will not intervene in future. And at the same time, the confrontation which I mentioned, which was started just after the creation of Pakistan, the religious community all the times, they had come up with their own blueprint that we want this kind of the constitutions. And every time the power elite, they, in 1956 constitutions, they made a little compromise. In 1962, they made more compromises with religious communities to get the religious legitimacy of their constitutions. And the 1973 constitution, where it's supposed to be one of the best constitutions in Muslim world, there was the hectic debate in the parliament on the definition of the Muslim. It consumes more energies of the parliament. Then the other issues were discussed, and the many components of the constitutions being written or being drafted by the bureaucracy or the few legislators who had the command over the legal systems, frameworks of the subcontinent. And what had happened while discussing the definition of the Muslim? The parliament come up one of the worst decision. They excluded the one sect, the Ahmadiyya communities, from the definition of the Muslim. And the Ahmadiyya communities been declared that they are not Muslims, and this was one of the issue which contradict with its preambles that the Constitution will guarantee the equal rights to all citizens of Pakistan. And this was these religious communities considered as one of their biggest achievement in constitutional history of the Pakistan. And before that, in 1964, when the General Ayubs had introduced the family laws, they were resisting. They had launched the protest campaigns, and the impact of these campaigns were still coming on until the formation, construction of these constitutions. And they were quite jubilant while declaring the Ahmadiyya as a non-Muslims, including the definition of the Muslim in the constitution, that they had forget about the Islamization of the family laws in Pakistan. And we still are inheriting the family laws which were introduced by the General Ayub regime, which are based on a very secular British or laws in the country, and nobody challenged. few times they try to challenge because of the right of the divorce, the more of the guarantees for the women rights in case of divorce, or the child custodies in these cases been ensured in these family laws. So this was, and one other aspect, this constitution had united the, yeah please.
So what is the status now? Is the Ahmadiyya community incorporated under the meaning?
Yeah, they are still non-Muslim. So we have, unless we have the definition of the Muslim in the constitution, they will remain the declared non-Muslim community in Pakistan. And another aspect of these constitutions, that during the 70s, there was the nationalist sentiments were quite high in parts of Pakistan, mainly in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. But this constitution had united all ethnic, linguistic communities of Pakistan, and they participated in the constructions of these constitutions. And they get ensured the more powers, the equal freedom, rights for the ethnic communities in Pakistan. And gradually what we have seen, that this constitution has become the binding force for Pakistan. It unites Pakistan. This is the only document where the religious communities, where the nationalist leadership, where the mainstream, where the leftist parties, where the seculars, where the centralist parties are agreed, though they have concerns about the certain clauses, which we will discuss further, but they think this is the document which unites the nation. And this is the reason whenever the military or security establishment intervene, they demands for the restoration of the constitution. Even when the General Ziaul Haq in 1976 imposed the martial law, all opposition parties had democracy restoration movement for more than 10 years, and the major demand was the restoration of the 1973 constitution. And in this movement, all religious parties, mainstream parties were participating. Though, as I mentioned, these constitutions contain provisions declaring it treason not only to abrogating but to attempt, conspire or plan to subvert the constitution and effort to prevent future military takeovers. But 77 martial law. One component, important factor we will discuss later, was the weak judiciary in Pakistan. The political leadership has come up with the efforts to have a comprehensive social contract, though it's full of contradictions. But the judiciary component was quite weak. They all the times come up the doctrine of necessity, and they endorse the military interventions, and they help the military leadership to subvert the constitution of Pakistan. And they always allow the military regimes to run the state affairs through PCOs, provisional constitutional orders. If you look at the Pakistan history, we more than 24 years the country was run under the PCOs. Yeah, please.
I just want to understand that why there is a military coups so often in Pakistan. What is the relationship of civil government and military government, and what are the reasons why military is able to establish rule, or military is regularly intervening into the affairs of civilian government? What are the reasons for that?
Yes, civil-military relations. This, if you allow me, first I will finish this. This is the issue which is quite critical and important in the constitutional history of Pakistan. We will discuss. So first, I wanted to introduce the very important component of the constitution and the issues linked with the constitutionalism in Pakistan. And these are the list of the constitutional challenge. In 1985, the constitution was restored, but with its eighth amendment, which had endorsed the previous orders by the military dictators, and even come up with many clauses to bar the political governments to fully function. And we have seen that because of this 8th amendment, a big political crisis was created during the 90s. The Pakistan People's Party, two governments, and two governments by the Pakistan Muslim Leagues were dismissed by the president because of the power which were granted in the 8th amendment, and they dismissed on the charges of corruption or the mishandling the state affairs. And this was 8th amendment keep open the window for the military leadership to intervene and topple the governments. And this was the Nawaz Sharif government, the previous in late 90s, tried to be fill this gap and to shut this window of the military intervention. And he has come up the amendments and stopped these kind of the military intervention and given the power to the parliaments. The parliament will decide if this government should continue its function or not. Then the weak judiciary, which I mentioned, was quite important factor in the constitutional history of Pakistan. The courts are meant to act as protector of the constitutions and the suppression of power. They had often given way to the Pakistan leader on matters of constitutional law, either in the name of necessity of survival. In 1999, again the Supreme Court validated the declaration of emergency and creation of another PCO during the Musharraf regime. And this PCO was one of the worst PCO according to the many constitutional experts in Pakistan. And the Musharraf had added the many clauses in the constitutions which later in 2010 after 18th amendment were removed by joint consensus of all political parties in the parliament. So after 1973 constitutions, the most important amendment in the constitutions were made, which we consider as the reconstruction of the constitution, was the 18th amendment, which has somehow restored the sanity of the constitution of Pakistan. They come up more restrictions, the safety walls to stop the military interventions. It's come up with a more balance between the federating unit of Pakistan. This is the amendment which come up with more equal resources distribution among the different provinces and the federating unit of Pakistan. It's also given the freedom to the federating unit to come up with their own educational policies, which is one of the critical area right now in Pakistan. about the security establishment and the religious leadership is not happy. They think this is the subject through which they control or they manipulate can manipulate a lot of things. And there's a lot of efforts going on that the education once again being made a federal subject and controlled by the federal unit. But this is interesting that during the Musharraf period and the transition for the next political government in 2008, a lot of things happens in Pakistan. We were not fighting only the war on terrorism at that time. We were fighting another war inside the country. It was the fight for our political rights. It was the fight for the restoration of the full constitutions. It was the fight for the restoration of the judiciary image in Pakistan. It was a fight to make judiciary more stronger, that it could stand against all the military security interventions in the country. So in 2007 to 2009, we had the most vibrant civil society movement in the country. And one of the primary characteristic of this civil movement, and all again, after a long time, all the religious, secular, liberal, moderate, secular elements get united together in this movement. One side there was Pakistan People's Party leader Benazir Bhutto was leading the movement. On the other side there was a Jamaat-e-Islami Qazi Hussain Ahmad, then the Maulana Fazlur Rahman, then the Mian Nawaz Sharif. All were at the same platform, were part of that movement. And 18th Amendment is basically derived from this movement, that we should have resolved all these issues. And this movement forced the military dictator to resign. It happened first time in the history that judiciary, which was being sacked by the military ruler, been restored. After that, we see a phase of the judicial activism in Pakistan, to whom maybe many disagree that what was the cases during this active judicial activism being taken. But it was the prime time that the courts ordered, they summons the military dictators in the courts. They summons the prime ministers in the court. They summons the intelligence chiefs in the court. And they come in the courts. So this was one of the important phase of Pakistan history, where the judiciary in Pakistan get the confidence and come up with the certain institutional balance in the Pakistan. And this is because of this phase that we have seen the more smooth transition, the political transition and the security establishment transitions. So this was the power of the constitutionalism, the civil society activism to come up and to fight for their rights. And so far, the impacts of this movement is still going on. So this was the perspective I wanted to share with you. The question being raised by Raj, what was the reason that the security establishment intervened again and again in Pakistan? The military establishment think that they are best custodian of not only the Pakistan's borders, but as well as its ideological border. But this is one of the disciplined, organized institution in Pakistan, which in many times wants the rapid progress on certain fronts. But we know that the political parties, the political actors, they have their own way to deal with the issues. And dealing these many issues, the foreign policy issues, or the domestic issues, which create the mistrust again and again. If you look at the military's composition, even in India, from where the most of the military men comes, they comes mainly from the lower middle classes. And this is a phenomenon we have seen in many countries. And the military is basically become more idealist in their attitudes. It wasn't the case in 1956, but it was the case in two military interventions in 70s and 90s that the whole these martial law was completely supported by the whole institutions. So this is the major problem always exists. And the solution is that the political leadership will have to take the responsibility to run the affairs of the state. And the political institution all the time had compromised. And this is in 2007, after this amendment, which has cautioned the political parties, which has presented their shoulder to the military, that is not anymore will be tolerated by the Pakistani society. So this is something very important happened in this transition. The consensus among the society and the political actors that they will not allow. Even during last few months, when there was a lot of talks were going on about the extension of this army chief, or there was a rumors specifically triggered by the international media, not by the local media, that the chances of the military interventions are there, but the military never take this step because there was no such space was available in the country that they could intervene and they get endorsed by the masses. All the time the military intervene when they see the frustration level among the masses was high and they get endorsed. But this time the situation was completely different. So you were discussing all the time in the last 2 days, I have the fundamental rights. I wanted to introduce with you the fundamental rights ensured in the Constitution of Pakistan. From Article 8 to 28 guarantee the fundamental rights of the citizen in Pakistan. So Article 8, and this, if you will have question about these rights, some fundamental rights, and the contradictions and the functional mechanisms, I think I will be happy to answer. The Article 8 talks about the laws inconsistent with or in deregulation of the fundamental rights to be applied. This is, of course, is ensured in all constitution in South Asia. Security of person, it has included many subclasses. All these classes, articles have many subclasses. I only included those which may be important in our current perspective. No person shall be deprived of life or liberty save in accordance with law. Article 10 safeguards as to arrest and detentions. This is quite important. No person who is arrested shall be detained in custody without being informed. The second clause, it has more than 10 clauses. Every person who is arrested and detained in custody shall be produced before magistrate within a period of 24 hours of such arrest. So this second clause is important in its ongoing security situation in Pakistan, because we have introduced two ordinances during last 3 years. One was called the Fair Trial Law, which have given the rights to law enforcement agencies for the 28 days of the remand period in the terrorism cases, and the Pakistan Protection Ordinance is being extended to 90 days. So these ordinances are contradictory to these clauses, and these debates issues been raised in the parliament many times. Though it has some clauses, even then this is quite critical. The 10A is about the fair trial. This is how I can make it. Ravi, I can't read it. I'm blind. I don't have my glasses.
But we can read it.
You can read it?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Should I come?
This is about the slavery.
Another opportunity which that India Pakistan was together. You can take it on.
This is slavery. Yes. Only 10 slides.
This one?
No. This is. This is the problem of our age. I don't know how to handle this technology.
आप आप भाई
आप तो हमारे एज ग्रुप से हैं
Actually, outline is to